Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Revive Edmonton Town Hall. My name is Scott Johnson, and I'll be moderating tonight's conversation, part of Raheem Jaffer's citywide listening tour. Before we begin, please note that this session is being recorded as part of our effort to build transparency and gather feedback to shape the campaign. And if you're joining us online, we invite you to continue submitting questions throughout the evening using the chat box on the right hand side of your screen. We'll be monitoring that throughout the session. I'd also like to begin with a land acknowledgement. We are gathered on Treaty 6 territory, traditional land of the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, and Nakota Sioux peoples. We honor the Indigenous communities who have cared for this land for generations and recognize their ongoing contributions to the city of Edmonton. So now let's begin an honest conversation about how we can revive this city for all of Edmonton. Good evening, Raheem.
Hi, Scott. Thank you so much for moderating these great sessions that we've had so far. I want to apologize to everyone for being a little tardy today. As you can see, I'm not in a normal setting. I'm at my business, and my office is a shambles. But this is where we had to do the town hall tonight because, as a business person, sometimes you can't leave your business as much as you want to. And here I am. I've been here all day, and unfortunately, we'll end the night here. But that's how it goes sometimes. So once again, I appreciate everyone's patience and apologize for these real challenges with people with real jobs. As many of you will know, that can be a challenge. So I want to thank you all for joining us because it seems like our numbers are growing each time we've been hosting these town halls. I think people are tired of what they've seen at City Hall. They want to help revive Edmonton. They want to help bring a lot of better things and better days to what we're seeing in City Hall. And I know that it all starts by listening to people. And that's one of the key reasons we decided to hold these town halls over the course of the last week and this week, and then a set of live town halls next week. So we're very excited, and we're hearing some great feedback from people telling us what they think is working, what isn't working, and where they want to show where they want their politicians to really listen and change things. And so hence the Revive Edmonton tour. And I won't take up any more time because I know there'll be probably a lot of questions, and I look forward to answering them and engaging with all of you during the course of the evening. Thanks so much,
Well,
Scott.
you do get around. You were telling us earlier that you were, last night were at the Edmonton Police Service Community Town Hall. What was that about?
So yeah, last night was a really, I thought, a very helpful town hall um, that the Edmonton Police Service hosted when it came to issues relating to the South Asian community, in particular, the rise of what we saw over the course of the last couple of years of a lot of what is shakedowns by gangs originating either from India or even some based here that are linked back to India, but that are in particular were targeting developers and threatening them, especially developers from Indian origins or South Asian origins, that if they weren't going to pay extortions, if they weren't going to pay ransom fees for whatever these guys were alleging, they would harm them or harm their property, which is very serious. And so we saw, unfortunately, during their first process of investigation called Gaslight, they focused in on a lot of this gang activity that was committing arson or threats or extortion. And this was just an update because, as much as I think they were successful the first time around 2 or 3 years ago when they started this process, they've now seen more, unfortunately, rash threats that have been raising again, extortion and such. They were getting concerned about this, so they wanted to give the community an update and give them comfort that between the Edmonton Police Service, the RCMP, and a couple of other players, both international as well as national, they were trying to focus in on where these organization of these groups are, how they can crack down on them. And they were encouraging those in the South Asian community to understand that they could speak out and share with them information that they might feel is could be helpful in the police investigation of these crimes. So I found it was difficult for the police because of course they can't share too many details. This is an active and ongoing investigation, but they wanted to just reiterate that they're putting a lot of resources to this, that they are engaging with a number of different levels of governments and police forces, and they wanted everyone to know that they should feel some comfort because they're making significant progress as they have in the past. So, in light of some of these circumstances, not being able to share details, it was still, I think, a very helpful and useful town hall that took place last night.
So it was a crisis in 2024. Police made some arrests, got some progress on it. It's flaring up again. I guess the message is if you see something, say something.
That's right, and they wanted to emphasize a couple of things. One was that the community should not be afraid to share information that they may have, or knowledge that they might have with the police. They were very smart to have obviously some constables from the South Asian community that obviously serve in the Edmonton Police Force. One in particular was very helpful in providing translation as well for the community while he was answering questions. So I found the interaction, the respect, the tone that the police held when it came to the town hall was very professional. I think they did as good a job as they could, and of course they also shared the information with many of us know of Crime Stoppers and the fact that people can anonymously leave tips, which is something that also I think was settling for some of the community that maybe had not used some of these devices before of working with the police.
Something second nature to most here, but for newcomers, they probably don't know and don't know that you can trust the police, I would think.
That's right. I think there is obviously, and I think I've addressed this a little bit too at different times when we've talked about improving crime and safety, dealing with the problems that we have in our society and figuring out ways to improve it. One of the things that I'd said, personally believe, and I think many do, that if you find that there's challenges sometimes that arise within the way the police may service communities, or incidents that may happen, it's not the answer to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but how do you work on improving those services, collaborating with different community organizers, collaborating with certain social services so that the police, in the hard work that they have to do, can do a much better and more encompassing job in serving the public when they're dealing with certain tough situations. So here was a great example of their commitment to the community as part of Edmonton, to work on trying to find out who is perpetuating these, really difficult and terrible crimes against a targeted community, and encourage them to know that they could speak out without any repercussion, that their ability to be able to share information could remain anonymous, as well, that they should feel that the police are partnering with them to ensure that the community remains safe, which I thought was a very good message.
Well, right. We're in the heat of summer now, so that also brings us Pride season. How do you support the LGBTQ2S plus community?
So, of course, Pride is a very exciting month for many people in this city, and I think it's something that a lot of Edmontonians celebrate, regardless of their sexual orientation. We're fortunate here at Rooster Kitchen, and I'm here tonight, as I mentioned earlier. We're very fortunate that over the past number of years, where we've created a lot of exciting things here. One of the things that I continuously hear from a number of communities, in particular the Pride community, is that they feel safe here, they feel engaged here, they feel respected here, and that's something that I think all Edmontonians feel similar feelings, I think, when it comes to welcoming and encouraging and engaging that community. And I know that for me, it's more just about words. It's about demonstrating action. And that's, I think, something that I'm very proud of here at Rooster Kitchen, especially going into Pride Month, at the fact that we've had not only, a welcoming open space that I spoke about, but we've hosted drag shows. We've had other cultural events from that community, from the Pride community, that has been very active here. And I think really speaks to the fact of what we've created at Rooster, like I said, that I'm very proud of. But I look forward to celebrating over the course of the next few weeks and during the next month, especially as the parade happens and other events, as I know there'll be around the city. So I'm encouraged all those who are interested, who want to learn more, to please get out there and celebrate some of the events in your community.
There were issues. I mean, it was a great event, and then a little bit of controversy joined in. Is it on its way back to where it once was?
We'll find out. I think there's a lot of optimism about the way that pride can evolve. I think everything is an evolution. Everything is a process where people learn from. So I think that this time around, it looks like there's a lot of energy, a lot of excitement. I think there are a lot of lessons learned on all sides of how we can better embrace, especially things relating to pride for all families and all backgrounds. And of course, I think that's something that I'm excited about. I think that there'll be some new energy and some new maybe points of view, and hopefully some people exposed to it that have never been a part of it. So I think all in all, I'm looking forward to seeing what will transpire over the next month. But already there's a lot of businesses, individuals, and others celebrating these kind of activities around Pride, and so we look forward to that as well.
All right. Please join us with some questions. Just go to the right hand side of your screen and you can type it in. We'll relay it to Raheem. Transit is something we've been talking about in all of these listening sessions as we look to revive Edmonton. What's your message on transit and how to improve it, how to make it affordable, and how to make it welcoming to the riding public?
Well, I think definitely the issue of safety and having the transit system, whether it's the LRT or bus system, available to everyone, feeling comfortable and safe to be able to ride it, especially as we continue to see the expansion of many of these things, many of the routes, many of the infrastructure improvements. There is clearly a problem in the way that we've evolved the current system, because we have had, I even for myself, whether it's my staff here or others that communicated since we've started this campaign, they're concerned with the safety on transit. So this is a number one issue that I think we need to really focus on. And I think one of the things that I've said, that I was always amazed from the places I've traveled, and the type of systems similar to our LRT, that ensured that there was some sort of barrier, some sort of process where those who are paying and have passes to ride it are getting access to it, and not those who may not have business to ride it, or may not have the intention to use it strictly for transportation. This is something that's a very serious problem, and I know I've heard it particularly from women that have said they will not ever take transit because they may have done it before and they've found it to be very concerning, some of the activity they've seen, feeling safe in certain areas where there's congregation of people on platforms and such that maybe shouldn't be there. So clearly safety is number one. We're also looking at a couple other areas that we can help improve ridership by making it more affordable, and we're currently looking at the costs, evaluating a number of different things that we might be able to tweak in the city over the next little while in order to encourage safe work on the safety issue, but encourage ridership. And that's something we hope to announce within the next little bit, especially as we get our final numbers together. But of course, I'm encouraging those who have experience with transit, whether it's the buses, whether it's the LRT, to share them with me as we continue to put our policy together, because we know that safety seems to be the number one challenge. But secondly, then affordability. And that's not only just on the LRT. I know that, as I mentioned before as well, our buses, when some of my staff have to ride the bus to come in here, they get frustrated because here they are following the rules, buying their tickets or bus pass, and then having to deal with that element that's coming on the bus, just expecting a ride, not any concern about paying for a ticket, and then disrupting the service or causing obviously stress for a number of those passengers. Again, you know, just making that distinction, should they even be on the bus, especially when they're abusing that privilege. So that's these are the things that I'm hearing, and I'd like to continue to hear more as we focus on a very, I think, policy relating to transit that will be very effective in how we will solve some of these problems.
Where does the enhanced security have to be? Is it on the platform or in the bus shelter, or is it on the vehicles?
So I think it's a combination. For sure with the LRT, we do need some sort of a barrier that people would have to pass through in order to get on the LRT. If we make that kind of investment over the short term, I believe that safety element will increase by 60, 70, 80%, in some cases even potentially higher, depending on how the turnstile system that we would develop and put on within the LRT system, how effective that will be. I think it will really have an impact on those who are riding and those who shouldn't be riding. Then I think for the meantime, because there's been policy seems to have gone completely the other direction on the buses, where you don't have really any control. Because there aren't any officers riding on it regularly, there isn't any enforcement. So, if we can remove what I believe the province and the city was talking about, putting um, officers of peace officers and others, potentially security, which security might be there currently, but assigning more peace officers to the LRT. I'd like to move that to the buses, because I know that the buses are suffering in the similar way, and there's nobody to actually deal with those current situations, because the drivers can't do much in that scenario, and of course the passengers are feeling threatened in many cases. So it would be helpful to have some stability come into the buses over the next little while, in order to have that police presence or that peace officer presence to deter any behavior or activity that shouldn't be on the bus.
Is enough being done with video surveillance?
It doesn't seem to make a difference from what we're hearing, because there's no, again, action once things on video, unless the crime is unfortunately serious, which is what we want to try to avoid in the first place. When you have people getting on the bus and then there's video going, if they are committing a terrible crime, then of course the police will respond. But it's still just the day-to-day challenges that my staff tell me about, and I've heard from others. You get on the bus and someone gets on the bus that might have, be unfortunately under the influence of something, or dealing with mental challenges, and they not only pose a threat to themselves but now everyone on the bus. And because that isn't necessarily something the police can enforce, even if they have video of it, it's just a constant fear that many riders are facing as a result of no one saying, well, wait a minute, you shouldn't get on the bus for these reasons. You don't have a ticket. And they're taking that into their hands, because they're the ones who would be able to enforce it, rather than leaving it to the video surveillance right now, where just bus riders are then having to decide if something is serious and whether they will intervene, which shouldn't be the responsibility of any innocent citizen riding the transit.
All right, some questions have come in, and you can join us as well if you go to the right hand side of the screen and type into the chat box what we've got going here. This question: why should Edmontonians trust City Hall again after years of rising taxes and falling services?
Well, that is a major question, I think, and it's in fact one of the major questions of this election, is that who do Edmontonians want to represent them? Especially when, in light of what we've seen, as we've repeated in our campaign thus far, a steady decline under the current leadership, whether it's councillors, mayors, or others that have been affiliated with the management of the city. How is it that people are paying so much more? And I don't have to, I know people's blood starts to boil, because this is an issue that I hear very loud and clear. The property tax increases that we've seen back to back over the last 2 years, you would think that with that increases of revenue, especially because some of these properties, as a result, have gone down in value, but still with the increased revenue of the increase of almost 17%, you would see that services would increase, as service ability would increase. But the problem is, as we've said right from the start of this campaign, we need to get back to basics in the management of the city. We don't have a council or a mayor that understands that. That's why we not only are running deficits in the city, but as much as we continue to increase revenue, it still doesn't match up. This city has a spending problem, not a revenue problem. And as a result, all the services that we depend on are getting affected. We need to get out of the business of the things that maybe are the provincial responsibility or federal responsibility, or even better, have a relationship with those governments so that we can, in fact, focus in and say, look, this is something Edmonton's concerned about, Edmontonians want to deal with, whether it's climate change or other issues, but it's not necessarily in the purview of Edmonton as a government because we have to provide the other services. How can we partner up in order to be able to address this, or what initiatives are happening at the provincial level that we could support? These are the kind of things that we do need to really focus on and say how, in fact, can Edmonton deliver its services that it should and have to deliver to its citizens without getting into things that really don't help the delivery of those services at the end of the day, because it's well beyond the scope of what the city of Edmonton should be doing. So I think this is something that we are in the process of consulting. We're hearing from Edmontonians. We're hearing about their lack of attention to snow removal, to potholes, to even some cases garbage collection, which is some of the basic stuff that the city should do well. And we're trying to say, okay, well, if we want to make these things a priority because Edmontonians want it to be, why are we spending money in areas like some of these priorities that are clearly not the business of the city? Let's get back to basics and make sure we deliver the services Edmontonians deserve and need.
Anything spring to mind that's nice to have, not a need to have, that you want to reverse?
Well, I know that, as I mentioned, there are some initiatives on the climate side that we hear that there's an office that's functioning in purview of the city. But again, how much impact they can have without the cooperation and coordination with the federal government and the provincial government. And again, it's not really in the purview of the city. The city can do things and work with industry and work with others to create incentives and maybe awareness on ways to improve environmental issues around the city, but not necessarily fund directly these kind of initiatives where it takes money out of the ability to do what everyone wants them to do, which is the basic core services that should be delivered in a great way, given the amount of revenue the city is collecting. There are other areas too that I know that we can highlight, especially when it comes to spending in again areas outside of the core of what the city should provide. We are going to be highlighting many of those over the course of the next couple of weeks, especially as we get closer to our policy platform document. So I don't want to let the cat out of the bag or the secrets right now, because we are hearing, which is great. We're getting a lot of information from people across the city saying, what why is Edmonton doing this, or why is Edmonton spending money on this, when clearly that's not in the purview of what a city should be delivering.
Anybody bring something to you that made you go, "Hey, I like that. Let's look into that."
There have been a few things that are so far from these town halls, and others who have sat down with me and met with me and talked about. Some of them we were talking about already since we made our parking announcement. I've been fortunate that I've had customers here at the restaurant even before I made this announcement, who have shared their frustration with wanting to get out, support local business, wanting to get out and have a coffee downtown or support a festival downtown, and then getting so frustrated because they can't figure out how to pay for parking. If they're elderly, they've had challenges with the app. In fact, I've had to help customers who come into my restaurant who have just been, you could see how stressed they were because they weren't sure if they should leave. I had to help them make sure they had the app downloaded and then help them with the credit card information. And they were just so frustrated, but thankful in the end that we were able to help them. But that's one thing that, of course, we've taken action on. We've talked about the bike lanes, and in particular, how bike lanes in some of the planning it has been so detrimental for the creation of so many things like housing or economic opportunity or other things that have just been unfortunately not planned as well as they should be. And hence, we found that people were very receptive because they're the ones that were telling us about their frustration about putting a halt on all bike lanes until we get a chance to properly review where the negative outcomes are. And of course, we're going to continue as we're hearing from more people. Of course, landfill is infill, sorry, not landfill, but infill is a big problem with many communities, mature communities here in the city. And we've already been suggesting the idea that with future infill projects, especially in more mature neighborhoods, that we attach one parking stall per dwelling to make sure that that creation of whatever that development is fits in the neighborhood, and look at other spots for larger developments that might be along transit lines or bigger parcels of land. So these are all things that we're hearing from people, and we're taking action already in announcing ideas that I think are really resonating with Edmontonians. This will only become more finely tuned as we get ready to launch our policy document in just over a month from now.
Another question from our chat room. What will you do to ensure councillors show up, vote, and represent their wards and not special interests?
Well, there's something, it's a great question. And the question that I think I would put back, or I would suggest, is this is an opportunity. This election is an opportunity for Edmontonians to send a very clear message about this question. And that's, maybe it's time to replace the current administration with those who have that as part of their platform. Accountability, um, being there when votes are taken, uh, ensuring that they're active and engaged with the public. These are all things that, in my opinion, have gone completely out the window over the last, I would say, decade or longer. When was the last time I've seen an actual town hall where you have the interaction of the public, you putting yourself out there and ensuring that you're holding yourself accountable for the decisions you're making? If anything, I see these current councillors sort of hiding from that and not wanting to engage and be held accountable for many of the things that they've decided on. I think that's so important. And let's face it, even as before, when I had the great fortune to serve as a member of parliament, you'd never miss a vote. I mean, granted, there were votes that were whipped and so on, but still, I had an obligation to my constituents. And while parliamentary session was happening, I wouldn't go far from there. I would ensure that I would be there, able to represent them on all those votes. And so, it seems common sense to me that if you're working as a counselor or a mayor, that you wouldn't a take a break to run for a better job, or b ask for a promotion, especially when you're not showing up for your duty to vote every time. These are things that are clearly common sense, and they're obligatory for those who are entrusted to do the business of the city. And in fact, why this is even an issue is beyond me, but here's the chance for Edmontonians to say enough is enough. We need some fresh new views. We need people to help revive the city. Let's get these old guys out and replace them with people with new vision. Oh, your mic's off again.
I mentioned special interests. Have you seen an example of that where you're thinking council has strayed or certain councillor has strayed?
Well, and of course, maybe some of these things will come out over the next little while, but there's been obviously concern that, in particular, with the infill issue that I talked about just earlier, that that some of the councillors may be a little too close to developers. Hence, they don't want to restrict anything when it comes to the way that infill is maybe done around the city. So that may be an issue, that why some councillors, one in particular, may not have wanted to show up for the vote. But this would be a shame. Even these sort of unfortunate rumors, if in fact they are true, what a shame it is for our city, because it's just so short-sighted and just so selfish, especially when you think about future generations. For me, I don't need this job. I don't need to be line my pockets, or I don't need to take this job because it's the best job I'm ever going to have. I've been fortunate. I've been able to do well in my life, not excessively well, but I live within my means. I have enough for my family, but I want this city to be better. I believe in the concept of public service, and even there was a time where I was saying, I would do this job for a fraction of what the councillors and the mayors and the mayor takes home, because it's a public service. It's something you do to give back to your community. I've the fortune to have a lot of experience from serving federally, from being a business owner, from my education, and I want to give something back so I can make this city as great as it was when I was younger for my son. So the last thing that I would want to have is special interests dominating anything that I'm doing, or try to offer me something that I would turn down flat, because it's so important to get back, as I keep saying, to the basics. Because if the basics are done right, then everyone benefits from it. Everyone profits from it. The city comes alive, and jobs are created, and people are excited about what's happening as they used to be. This city was called the City of Champions for a reason, not just because of our sports teams, but because there was an energy here that was just passionate in every aspect of the city. I can't ask, I can't tell you the amount of people who feel, even though they're proud about so many things in this city, they feel like we've lost their our identity. They feel like there's been something missing, that there's no real direction. These are the things that have led me to want to get involved. And they're not based on any special interest, I can tell you that. It's about wanting to make this city better for all of Edmontonians.
Well, you mentioned the basics: potholes, snow removal, garbage collection. How do you make it consistent across all the neighborhoods?
Well, I think, one of the things that I've seen, and I've been fortunate that I've been able to live in a few different neighborhoods, of course, family in different neighborhoods, so we get a chance to visit, whether it's the north side, the south side, southwest, so, and even out east. It's interesting that in certain neighborhoods, they're experiencing similar challenges sometimes. For a while, there was one neighborhood just east of us that was saying that garbage suddenly disappeared, that it was around the long weekend, and for 2 weeks, no one came to pick up the garbage. And I think some of the neighbors got upset and called I don't know what the hiccup was, but clearly that sort of thing is just unacceptable. How the city all of a sudden stopped serve basic services for whatever reason, or is not able to manage it to avoid paying too much, for instance, collecting on stat holidays or other things like that. There's a lot of management things that I think need to, again, come back to the basics and give what is so important value for taxpayers. Sometimes that seems to go out the window when it comes to the way the contracts are awarded, maybe the way the city employees are retained. We need to look at what creates opportunities for jobs with the city, no doubt, but what gives value. So, is there a different model? If there's a way we can ensure that the costs remain as stable as possible, and we don't have these fluctuations when we don't need to, so that it costs taxpayers more, just to ensure that snow removal, garbage, any other types of filling the potholes, these things are done in the most effective and most cost effective in ways that we can, to ensure that Edmontonians' value for dollar is there. And I would hazard the guess that right now, when we look at some of the numbers coming out of the different departments for costs, that there's something upside down, that the cost related to many of these services are way out of line with what they should be. And hence, we need a full review on how we can bring those down, and look at the way that we can add value for taxpayers, because that seems to be a concept that's completely gone out the window.
Is that budget creep just little incremental increases year over year over year?
Well, and I saw this at the federal level, where often you would see an initiative, for instance, in a certain department, or a brand new initiative where the government, some issue came up that was really unpredictable. So they had to allocate resources. So instead of looking at where they could pull from existing departments that may not be as active and assign them to this particular area, they would hire a brand new group of people. It would be generally supposed to be temporary contract style stuff. But then once those budgets were allocated, it almost never came back saying, okay, we've completed this job. We can take this money out and reduce the budget. No, it would just keep growing. It would keep increasing. And there's no accountability with that kind of a model. The city is even more at a disadvantage because the revenue sources are limited. We have property taxes, we might get some grant money, we may get some project funding with different levels of government, but those services need to be so effectively delivered, because otherwise you're going to have a problem that we've seen now, unfortunately, in Edmonton, where we're running deficits. We continuously need more revenue to pay off things because there's nobody that has really the acumen to say, look, guys, we have to cut back. This is not making sense. We can't award these kind of contracts, or we can't have this kind of cost associated with staff on certain seasonal type of jobs. Like there's a lot of things you can review on a host of different fronts to say, how, again, how can we deliver the best value for our taxpayers, because we're doing a terrible disservice not only to them, but as I keep saying, our future generations in this city who want to have opportunity, who want to live in a place that has all these vibrant things and not have to be nickel and dimed or pay a fortune because they just want to enjoy the things that we've all enjoyed for so many years. But this takes real courage to say, hey, look, we'd have to make the tough decisions and get ourselves out of some of these things and ensure that we are getting the best value for the taxpayer. And that's something that I know even at the city level, this is something we'll be talking about a little bit more. But, you know, there are people I know, I'm sure, hanging on to their job because, of course, it's very important to have a job, that may want to change, may want to look elsewhere, maybe feel like it's time to shift gears from working in the city. And you have to take care of them and thank them for their service. So offering potential, retirement plans early if they want to get out and do something different, shift gears. This is one way. It may cost the money, a city, a little bit more money in the short term, but over the long term, you are hopefully encouraging change and encouraging vitalization, and encouraging those who maybe have reached a wall and want to look at something different to maybe do that. And it costs a little bit in the short term, but over the long term, you're going to create value for those who are in public service working and they're wanting to be there, and creating opportunities in the future for new people to come in, especially as that's required.
Over the years, city councils from past would talk about zero-based budgeting, but they wouldn't fully commit to that, and it's never really happened. Where not only do you just increase year over year, but you got to justify why you have to have that money or keep a program going. And if you don't justify it, it gets cut to zero. Are you a fan of that?
Oh yeah, of course. That's incorporating something like that would be very helpful. And when I talk about creating value for the taxpayers, it's about looking at these things in an honest way and not, falsely trying to protect things that aren't required. Because the way society is, things are changing. There's going to be opportunities for new exploration, new services that might be coming up that are integral to the city, just because the nature of our challenges are changing. So ultimately, you should have the ability, as some businesses are, to be nimble, to be able to adjust. Now, governments, that's a little bit tough sometimes, but there's no reason why you do this kind of self review and ensure that things that aren't working, maybe you have to reallocate that somewhere. One of the areas we've talked about is why it takes so long to process permits. One of the things that we've heard from people, they would like to see permits turned around within 30 days, at the most 40. And sometimes, in some cases, like festivals or other areas of permits, it's taking months. This is unacceptable. And if there's a reason for that, and if there's a need to refocus maybe in areas where there isn't as much activity now towards permitting, here's a great way to be able to do it. So we're not talking about cutting and restructuring in a way that's negative. It's just reevaluating and looking at things that maybe aren't required as much anymore. Where can you reallocate resources? And the same thing about zero budgeting, making sure that if in fact those projects, those services, whatever it might be, that maybe had a lifespan for a couple of years and now are no longer needed, be able to say, well, here's where we cut back, here's where we can allocate resources differently, or this is where we can put money back into the kitty to ensure that we're not falling short of any other type of opportunities just as a result of allocating these resources in a place that they shouldn't be.
So if there's a budget that has your stamp on it, would it be a 0%? Would it be inflation plus population growth? Would it be a cut? Where's your head on that?
Well, I know for sure one thing that I'm thinking about as we are looking at this as closely as possible to see what makes the most sense. I would be for sure hesitant to increase any taxes at all in the short term. Instead, I would look at a way to be able to look and see where can we save, where can we reallocate, and where can we ensure that that budgets are not increased, especially if we have the ability to reallocate resources. So I would be more inclined to say, let's look at the zero budget opportunity. Let's look at ways to be able to keep things without increasing in the short term, see where we can reallocate and ensure that where we do find savings, we start chipping away at the deficit and holding those taxes and costs lower so that we get further activity in the economy. Because the worst thing that you can do is continue to increase and tax your base. You're only going to get negative results as a result of that type of strategy. You're going to get businesses not opening, not focused growth at all, and you're going to get these budgets that are really not going to be reflective of where the services need to be. So I would do a combination of a couple of the things you suggested, but more importantly, not look at ways to increase any sort of fees or taxes until we're able to reallocate resources.
All right, let's move on to another topic of conversation. And that's, what would your plan be to deal with open drug use, encampments, in unsafe areas downtown and in other neighborhoods? Because we're starting to see it spread to South Edmonton as well.
Well, in that, and that's the big challenge that we're also having with this mobility of people using the transit when they maybe shouldn't be using it for this kind of activity of moving around. And then we've seen crime rise in some of the neighborhoods along the LRT and other places where they're able to access, especially those who are obviously engaged in activity that is criminal. But the open drug use and the encampments, I think one of the things that we've seen has been a real problem is the encouragement that this can happen anywhere. I know that there's two different views on this, like safe drug supply, and then other sort of efforts to just sort of work in trying to deal with the challenges just on a services way. But ultimately we cannot create safe environments in places where we want people to go, whether it's business improvement areas downtown or even some of the neighborhoods that are trying to revitalize in downtown, when this type of proliferation of drug use and such is just going unchecked. So clearly we need to have two sort of processes to deal with this. One is clearly enforcement has to be there, but it has to be hand in hand. And I've said this before. My fear is that there's not that proper collaboration from Edmonton and the provincial partner, regardless of who, as I said, is in government. That shouldn't matter. We need to be able to coordinate an effective strategy when it comes to enforcement, and as well the services attached with those who need services to get off the cycle of poverty and the drug use, but at the same time those who want to commit continuous crimes. And that was something we heard very clear last night at the Edmonton Police Services town hall, is that they really need the help to have an effective municipal government coordinated with the provincial government to deal with things like bail reform, which is what I've said before, the issues relating to justice and enforce, not just the enforcement side, but the crime and legal side of it, how you can actually not how you can stop this revolving door of those criminals who are repeat offenders, who are clearly a threat to society, who refuse to get help from the government or social services or whatever type of rehabilitation services that are offered to them. Those are the people we have to ensure are targeted to not to keep them off the street because they pose us a real threat and they refuse to change their behavior or get help. So there's almost a two-prong approach here where we can have the police come in and deal with some of the encampments and deal with the drug use. But again, if we're not going to get the support from some of the people who we're trying to encourage to help them break that cycle of poverty, help them to get help to get off the drugs, then there has to be something that comes in that's a little stronger than just the police arresting them and them getting out in a couple of days. But the bail reform issue and then strengthening the laws on the justice side to ensure those remain incarcerated that continue to perpetuate crimes and are a threat. that has to happen with the provincial coordination and cooperation. So this is something that I think, unfortunately, is missing completely right now, because to my knowledge, there is just not that coordination at all with the city of Edmonton. And for a while, it wasn't even with the police. I'm happy to see that that might be changing, but again, it's a little, it's too little, too late. But with the province, there's absolutely, it seems to me, no coordination on any of these very important issues, and you're only going to get half success as a result of this with the on the enforcement side.
You share the frustration with the Canada's premiers on the bail reform.
Yeah,
They're
I
really
think
going after the feds on that, aren't they?
they are. So again, I mean, I keep pointing to the province because the municipality can clearly push and encourage and work with the province. But if the province and the municipality are on the same page, that makes it even more powerful to deal with the federal government. But yeah, this is an issue I think that came up quite a bit at the federal election. It's also been an issue here provincially. But locally, we see the impact of that. We see the impact of not having a coordinated approach between enforcement and the justice side. Where, as I said, I could see the frustration from the officers just saying that, we're doing the best we can, but often this is where they get frustrated. Why go and arrest someone when it's a waste of time? They're going to be out on the street within a few hours. In some cases, they were saying.
What's your observation of how City Council gets along with the Edmonton Police Commission and Edmonton Police?
I just mentioned that it sounds to me that the tone, thank goodness, has changed, but very recently, because it seemed to me that over the last couple of years, there was a real strange relationship that evolved with the police and the council. And I think it came namely from some of the councillors in particular who were jumping on the bandwagon of the defund sort of campaign, defunding the police, which I don't think was as widely supported on council, but it didn't seem anyone was defending or arguing against that very loudly when it was coming up during some of the previous years of this council and previous councils. So I think it's a complete failure of leadership at the civic level when you don't have the relationship between the councillors and the mayor working hand to hand and often defending the work of the police in doing their work. Because one thing that I heard from a couple police officers last night is it was very demoralizing the last couple of years, where they were, trying to do their job, which is not an easy one. And then, if there was some negative press, or if there was shots, as we know in social media, that may look like, the police were being using excessive force, whatever it might be, they just felt that they were left out in the cold by much of the leadership. And as a result of that, that really deters their energy to want to put into doing anything about some of these issues, like we talked about on the last question, with the drug use, the encampments. To clean up the city becomes now a detriment for them, because if they are seen in a negative way when it may not necessarily be a negative thing, even though this job is a very tough one, no one was defending them. And so I'm glad to see that maybe that's shifting. And one of the important things to I think build that trust back is open communication. We noticed, again, this is in the dying months of this particular council and mayor. We finally saw some opening of communications, I think last month or the month before, but that's after 4 years of a complete deterioration of that relationship. I believe that you have to have a council and a mayor that backs up the police, appreciates the work that they do, but also when issues come up that are problematic, issues that may involve issues of sensitivity or other challenges that the police have to deal with today, as opposed to maybe over a decade ago or before COVID, that you need to be able to look at ways to support them in doing the work, whether it's getting the social services or the people who are involved in psychiatric help, and others to be able to be on the front lines working hand in hand with them to get the best outcome. Not to bury your head in the sand and say, oh, defund the police. This is the worst thing that could have happened, and I think has contributed to this deterioration that we've seen on a number of different issues, like of the previous question, but in general, just with the relationship that has evolved with the police.
Okay, let's move on to building business in Edmonton and encouraging entrepreneurship. And that always comes, it seems, around a red tape reduction. So we've all got our spools of red tape. Where do you get your scissors? How do you cut red tape and make it easier for business to thrive?
Well, and this is something that's very important to me as somebody who has been operating a business in the community over the last 8, almost 9 years. Also, a property owner, a landlord in many cases on White Avenue. We have property here. You know, it's a shame because what we've seen evolve is a real lack of attention and appreciation for those who want to take a risk to try to create jobs, to create more vibrant city, to create opportunities for others. We've seemed to make it tougher rather than creating an environment for them to succeed. We've gone from a culture where we used to thrive to one that's barely businesses are barely surviving because it's almost an afterthought. Like when we look at some of the things like the LRT expansion, uh, planning for road construction, uh, whatever it might be, we find more and more obstacles in the way of creating economic opportunity rather than looking at ways to mitigate those obstacles. You mentioned red tape. Again, I've heard stories not only of the time it takes to be able to get basic permits approved, but the cost. I've often cited a colleague that I know just here on the same block as I am has a property that wanted to build a brand new building and have a housing attached to it, have a brand new nice commercial, and their building's not historic or anything like that. It's an eyesore in his own words. They wanted to improve it, and just to put a shovel in the ground before they even start the construction costs, $80,000. I mean, that made no sense to me to be able to do the type of things that the city was asking them to do. This is just seems to be a no-brainer. I don't understand why it would be so difficult. So again, it's about the attitude. If we have a city council and a mayor who are more logically focused, not about practical solutions to ensure that businesses can move at a speedy pace, that they're not going to suffer losses in their planning and construction processes, then you're going to have things start to move again. You're going to have people in council that's going to support the ideas to encourage the red tape reduction and to encourage the support of these sort of initiatives. But this is something that is really a surprise to me because we've had even some of our family that we do business with, they've constructed major projects and the headaches they've told me about in dealing with the city when it never used to be that way. These are the things that we need to really ask ourselves. What does Edmonton want to have attracted to this city for opportunity? And those who are here who want to make the city better, how can we encourage them to do that without putting barriers up in their way? I know that one of the results of this lack of attention to create opportunity here in Edmonton and make it easier to facilitate growth has resulted in many businesses making active decisions to not only potentially close in Edmonton and move in some of the outlying municipalities where it costs a fraction to locate, and you still get the infrastructure of Edmonton, you still get the infrastructure of the airport. So they're taking advantage of what they have to offer and looking at other places to put their tax bases in, and that is as a complete loss for the city. So we have to really reevaluate how not only are we doing things and creating that environment for businesses to succeed, but why are we not coordinating more effectively what's happening with the municipalities right around Edmonton that are also so crucial in our operation? Whether it's coordination of industry, whether it's coordination of transportation. This is a hub that needs to be coordinated more effectively. And I'm not seeing that. And we're losing out not only to those municipalities who are rightfully so doing things to attract business, but we should be coordinating much more effectively than we are. And that doesn't seem to be happening either.
When you look at the public hearing process, Does it move too slowly? Does it afford opportunity for the naysayers to block projects? Should it move a little more quickly?
Well, I definitely think it can move a lot quicker, because if you look and see what they've done on the infill issue, even though it's had huge outcry, there's been little to no ability for neighborhoods to bring proposal changes, or maybe even voice their concerns against certain projects like these multiplexes that are built between bungalows and old neighborhoods. So obviously they're fast tracking infill because of whatever reason of density that the current council seems to want to push to a level that doesn't make any sense. So if they can fast track that process, clearly there's an ability to fast track other permits if that's the direction we want to go in. But as I said, I think you can still do it responsibly, but just do it effectively. One of the things that I worry about, and I think through my efforts of trying to uncover information from the budgetary office of the city, I mean, what is the allocation for resources towards permit uh, production, permit review, permit execution? It seems to me that if there's a delay, it's got to be a real problem for either resources, or just that there's some sort of different attitude towards getting these things processed. So these are something that I think we need to figure out on how to uh, do more effectively. But I point to that issue, that example of infill. If they can just have no public consultation and do whatever they want, I'm not advocating that, but I'm thinking there might be even a bigger problem, not just those in the public who are maybe saying they don't want certain development. I think most Edmontonians are pro development from what I see. They want to see a city that's vibrant and opportunities be created. Obviously, there's got to be different things taken into consideration, but it's almost like the attitude of this current council and mayor is not one to try to encourage growth or encourage investment. It's just to coast. And that, like I said, the coasting is not dating us anywhere. In fact, it's taking us backwards.
What needs to be done to grow the pie? It seems like some on the left want to slice the pie differently, but how do you make this pie bigger?
So I think one of the things I've been fortunate as well, when I was serving as a member of parliament, to liaise with a few different other countries, a few other municipalities, different other organizations that were able to create opportunities for investment by focusing in areas, maybe in one part of the country, for creating more of a data hub, or a IT hub, or getting high tech to look at investments in an area, creating a zone that made it attractive, and then having other services that supported those businesses. And they were able to move out of some of the old traditional types of industry that were fading in their cities, into something new, and create brand new opportunities and economic growth. This is an opportunity. I don't see that happening. When I alluded to coordinating with maybe the greater Edmonton area, it's talking about ways to attract businesses here that may find our climate agreeable, because maybe some of their industry creates more heat. Other types of industries that rely on transportation. We're a great hub for transporting things up north and all around this country. But we have to be able to be open to not only looking at those industries that we could try to encourage to look at Edmonton as an investment. How do we create then maybe the competitive um, policies, whether it's tax reduction initially for their investment, whether it's a process to give them a longer period if they hire so many employees to be able to defer taxes. Like, there's a lot of creative things that can be done, leveraging some of the investment from the provincial government or federal. But we have to be aggressive in attracting and courting some of these opportunities for business here. And then, as I mentioned, we have to be effective in leveraging what might be available through the provincial and federal governments. And again, I know at the provincial government level, where a lot of this can happen for us to stimulate potential investment and opportunities in new industry here in Edmonton, that relationship is just not working. So there's no way to leverage what could be available to us from the provincial government and ensure that that focus is directed towards economic growth here in Edmonton.
Well, I've been given the high sign from our producer that this hour has flown by and we're going to wrap things up here. Recapping that you've teased us a bit because you want to cut taxes, you want to cut red tape, you want to make things better for business, and you're continuing to listen to Edmontonians as you formulate the plan to accomplish all that. And you told us off the top of the show here that those announcements are coming soon, so stay tuned. So, how do you want to wrap it up tonight? Just as you bring more and more people into this Revive Edmonton tour.
And we've been very fortunate, Scott. This has been a great way for us to have frank discussions and hopefully get people involved in bringing their questions and thoughts to the floor. I'm also fortunate that I do have the outlet, and I'm finding uh, an uncalculated result is business is getting busier at Rooster because so many people are dropping in to see me, to ask questions and engage with me, which I encourage. It puts me a little bit behind schedule, but that's okay. I'm happy that they feel comfortable to come and see me. But that type of engagement, whether it's through the channels we're hosting, especially the live town halls, we have one more virtual one, I believe, on Thursday, and then next week some live town halls, which I'm hoping more people come down and share some thoughts with us. This really helps us to bring together the common thread that Edmontonians are frustrated with many things related to the way the city has been operating, that they really feel there needs to be a change in vision, and that they're willing to share what is working and most of what isn't working, to ensure that the next time around that the representation they get reflects the views of getting back to the basics that they all want to see do much better than that's been happening now. And hence this launch of the Revive Edmonton tour, which I'm so proud to have such a great team of people working with us. I'm proud thank you to you, Scott, for helping to moderate and keep this energetic and engaging. And I encourage all those who want to continue to get involved to either log on to our website and donate, or sign up for a sign, or to volunteer, and that's at votejaffer.ca. We want your feedback, we want your involvement, we want your input, and I look forward to meeting and talking with more of you over the course of these town halls, but even as we get closer to launching our platform and into the cut and thrust of the campaign. So thanks once again, Scott, for being here tonight.
It's amazing how fast a campaign flies by. So, we'll
That's right.
talk again Thursday. See you then.
Excellent. Thanks,
Cheers.
Scott. Bye bye.
Bye.